He didn't see it coming. None of them did. The cameras were still rolling when Prince Harry stood up, his jaw clenched, his eyes burning, and stormed off the set. No scripted exit. No forced smile. Just raw, visible humiliation. And Jon Stewart, sat there, stunned, half smiling, half regretting what had just happened. A moment that was supposed to be playful turned into a cultural tremor, broadcast live, then echoed across social media like a firestorm. But let's rewind. Because this moment wasn't born out of a single question. It was years in the making. When it finally exploded, cracked open something much deeper. This is the story of how Prince Harry, once the world's beloved royal rebel, found himself walking off The Daily Show, his face red, his past laid bare, and a legacy he fought to protect falling apart in front of millions. It was supposed to be a safe appearance, a bit of controlled vulnerability, a few self-deprecating jokes. Promote the latest mental health documentary. Stay on message. Stay in control. Harry's team had worked for weeks setting this up. Jon Stewart, a respected satirist but kind. Not known for ambushes, not Colbert, not Marr. Stewart was the empathetic voice of reason. That's what they told Harry. And maybe that's what Harry believed. But Jon Stewart wasn't the same man he'd been 5 years ago. He'd been quiet lately, watching, listening, waiting for the right moment to re-engage, not with soundbites, but with substance. He saw something in Harry, something he couldn't ignore. A contradiction. A discomforting blend of privilege and victory. A royal who rejected the crown, but demanded its respect. A man who fled the spotlight, yet always found the camera. Stewart had questions, real ones. And Harry had no idea how hard they would hit. The studio was electric that night. People were cheering, laughing, happy to see Stewart back at the desk. And Harry, he entered with a practiced grin, a little nervous but composed. He wore a fitted navy suit, casual without a tie, trying to walk that thin line between approachable and royal. Meghan wasn't with him, but her presence lingered in the narrative, in the subtext, in the reason he was even here. The conversation started light. Jon, so, California, huh? How's the weather treating you, compared to, say, the English tabloids? Laughter. Harry smiled. Let's just say it's sunnier, in more ways than one. Easy, controlled. He was playing the part, but Jon wasn't playing. He leaned in, eyes sharp, voice still soft. Jon, you've talked about mental health, trauma, the importance of healing, and yet, many would argue, you've made a career out of reopening old wounds. Do you ever worry you're profiting from your pain? The air shifted. The audience didn't laugh. Harry blinked. The smile faltered, but only slightly. Harry, I think sharing stories helps others heal. That's always been the mission. Jon didn't flinch. Jon, even if those stories drag your own family through the mud. Silence. This wasn't on the prep sheet. Harry glanced off camera toward the producer, toward safety, but none came. Jon, I'm not saying it's wrong to tell your truth, but when does that truth start sounding rehearsed? The audience shifted in their seats. You could feel if this wasn't a comedy show anymore. This was a reckoning. Harry tried to steer it back. He spoke of charity, of the Invictus Games, of his mother, always his emotional anchor. Harry, my mother taught me to speak out, to protect others. I won't apologize for that. But Stewart wasn't attacking his mother. He was questioning him, the man Harry had become. Jon, you say you walked away from the institution to protect your family. But since then, there've been books, interviews, documentaries, even animated parodies. Doesn't feel like walking away. Feels like selling access. That was it. You could see it. Something snapped in Harry's posture. He stiffened. His face tightened. Harry, I didn't come here to be insulted. Jon paused. Calm, measured. Jon, I'm not insulting you. I'm asking what millions of people wonder. If you don't answer here, where can you answer? The audience was quiet now. Tense. Harry exhaled sharply. His hand clenched the armrest of his chair. His other hand tapped against his knee unconsciously. Rapidly. He looked at Stewart, then the crowd, then back at Stewart. Harry, this was a mistake. He stood up without another word and walked off the stage. It wasn't dramatic. There were no angry shouts, no slamming doors, just silence. And then the sound of his footsteps leaving the set. The cameras stayed on Stewart, who looked for the first time in years, truly shaken. He turned to the audience. Jon, well, that wasn't in the script. A few nervous laughs. A few gasps. Then, cut to commercial. But the damage was done. Clips of the exchange flooded Twitter within minutes. TikTok spun it into sound bites. YouTube reaction videos dissected every eyebrow raise, every shift in tone. Some praised Stewart finally. Someone holding the Duke accountable. Others condemned him, too harsh, too confrontational, too American. No one could ignore it. The fairy tale was cracking. And beneath the glossy brand deals, behind the curated interviews, there was a man wounded, proud, unsure of who he was without the crown. What happened next? Well, that's where it gets even messier. Because this wasn't just about a walk-off. It was about identity, truth, and a very public unraveling of a very private struggle. But to understand that, we have to go back. Before the lights. Before the cameras. Back to the decision that changed everything. The day Harry said, "I'm done with being royal." It started long before that studio night. Long before the cameras. Long before California. Long before Harry had a choice. Born into the institution. Trained for obedience. Not for truth. Harry never asked to be royal. But he was. From the moment he opened his eyes. And from the moment he could walk, he was watched by cameras, by the press. By a nation hungry for fairy tales. But it wasn't a fairy tale for him. Not after his mother died. Not after the woman he loved was torn apart in headlines. Not after the silence from the palace felt louder than any tabloid scream. So when he left with Meghan, their baby, and the world on fire behind them, he told himself it was for peace, for freedom. But peace doesn't come easy when you've spent your entire life living a script written by others. And freedom, it has a cost. The moment Harry stepped into America, he wasn't just a prince. He was a product, a brand. Deals with Netflix, memoirs, interviews, podcasts. They said it was healing in public. They said it was authentic. But critics weren't so sure. The world watched as Harry, once the quiet royale, became louder, bolder, more confrontational, not just with the press, but with his own family. Accusations of racism in the palace, claims of isolation, leaked texts, dramatic sit-downs, Meghan's tears, Harry's fury, and behind it all, a question. Was this a man liberating himself? Losing himself? The British press hit back. Daily Mail, Telegraph, even former royal staffers. They painted Harry as reckless, spoiled, controlled by Meghan. Some called her Yoko. Others, worse. And through it all, Harry tried to hold the line. Publicly, he was poised. But behind closed doors, he was unraveling. Therapy sessions turned into strategy meetings. Family calls became cold silence. And the world split into two camps: those who saw him as a survivor, and those who saw him as a traitor. The invitation to The Daily Show came during a storm. Not a literal one, but one of headlines. Harry had just released his memoir, Spare. In it, he described his frostbitten genitals, his drug use, his military kills, his fights with William, his pain, his vulnerability. It was raw, honest, too honest. Some said, but it sold millions of copies, and it reignited the fire. Critics tore it apart. Friends of the royal family went on television and called it shameful. His own brother refused to comment, and through it all Harry smiled, or tried to. So when Jon Stewart's team reached out, his advisors were split. Some said, avoid it, he's too sharp. Others said, this is your redemption. He's respected, he'll treat you fairly. Harry, he just wanted to be understood. The night before the taping, Harry barely slept. He read notes, prepped anecdotes, practiced answers. He was ready for jokes, even for a bit of sarcasm, but not for truth. Not Stewart's truth. Because Stewart, though known for comedy, had a history of slicing deeper than politicians ever expected. His interviews with power were never about applause. They were about accountability. And Harry, despite everything, was power. And power doesn't always see itself clearly. Backstage, just minutes before going live, there were signs. Jon had asked for final cut. Harry's team refused. Jon insisted, I ask what I want. You answer what you can. That's the deal. Harry's PR guy pulled him aside. You don't have to do this. But Harry nodded. He needed this. Who thought he did? Back on stage, things unraveled fast. The laughter from the first segment evaporated as Stewart peeled back the layers. He brought up Afghanistan, the kills Harry confessed, the bragging tone in the memoir. Jon, you killed 25 people. That's not just a number. That's 25 families. Do you think the way you spoke about it was respectful? Harry flinched. Harry, It wasn't bragging. It was honesty. It was my truth. Jon, but was it theirs? A silence followed. Then came the Markle questions. Jon, do you ever feel like you're in a story that keeps needing a villain? First it was the press, then the family. Now, is it everyone who questions you? Harry stiffened again. Harry, that's not fair. Jon didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. Jon, maybe. But when your story keeps making you the hero and everyone else the enemy, people start to wonder. Harry looked away. Then came the deeper cuts. Jon, what's left when the interviews stop? When the books dry up? Who are you? When the spotlight turns off? That question hit different. Not because it was cruel. Because it was honest. Because Harry didn't know the answer. He'd built a new life, but it still depended on the spotlight. His freedom was still content. His healing was still monetized. And now, the mask was slipping. The audience could see it. They weren't laughing anymore. They weren't clapping. They were watching a man slowly realize the narrative was no longer his. Harry's jaw locked, his hands twitched. The room closed in. Then Jon mentioned Meghan. Jon, she's been through a lot. No one denies that. But do you ever wonder if protecting her has meant losing yourself? That was it. Harry inhaled sharply. Harry, you think you know me, Jon? No. I think I'm trying to. Harry, no. You think I'm a headline, Jon? I think you believed the headlines when they said you were the victim, and forgot you were still one of the most powerful men on earth. That line echoed in silence, and Harry stood, face burning. He didn't shout, didn't slam anything. He just stood and left. Backstage, it was chaos. Producers scrambled. Meghan's publicist called in. Phones blew up. The episode was cut short, but the moment it had already gone viral. Clips of Harry walking off circulated with ruthless speed. Some praised his composure, others mocked him. Memes flooded in. Commentators took sides. But the pain on his face, that wasn't edited. That was real. And for the first time in years, the world saw not a prince, not a rebel, but a man. Completely unsure of where he stood. He sat in the car afterward, staring at the window. Silent. His team asked if he wanted to release a statement. He said nothing, just stared. Because what could he say? The truth had caught up with him, and he wasn't ready for it. The night didn't end at the studio. It followed him in every glowing screen, every headline, every voice that dared to ask the question, what just happened? Harry was back at the hotel, high above the city skyline, but it felt like a prison cell, a luxury suite full of shadows and noise. Meghan wasn't there. She'd stayed behind in Montecito with the kids. It was supposed to be a short trip. In and out, controlled, safe. But nothing was safe now. His phone buzzed. Again and again. Calls from agents, publicists, a text from Meghan. What happened? Are you okay? He didn't respond. He stared at the screen. At himself, frozen in time on 100 YouTube thumbnails. Harry humiliated. Stewart destroys Prince Harry. Royal meltdown on live TV. And there it was, the moment it all collapsed. His eyes, his face. That single second before he stood up and walked off. Immortalized. It wasn't the first time he felt that collapse. There was another moment. Long ago, a sea of flowers. A sea of silence. The weight of the world watching two boys walk behind their mother's coffin. He had been 12. And even then he knew how to hide pain. But now the mask was cracking. He got up, walked to the mirror, stared at his reflection. He looked older, tired, angrier than he thought. This wasn't how it was supposed to go, he'd told himself. This journey was about truth. But maybe, just maybe, it was always about control. And now, that control was gone. The next day, Jon Stewart released a statement. Brief, professional, but honest. Prince Harry and I had a difficult conversation. It was not our intention to cause harm. We respect his choice to walk away and wish him healing on his path forward. It was diplomatic, polished, but behind it was the truth. Harry couldn't deny. He wasn't just embarrassed, he was exposed. And not by his enemies. By someone who once admired him. Social media exploded. Some cheered Jon Stewart as a truth-teller. Others said he crossed a line. But the world wasn't debating facts. They were debating Harry. Who he was, what he'd become, and whether the man preaching healing had ever truly healed himself. 3 days later, Harry finally left the hotel. Baseball cap, hoodie, sunglasses, but people still recognized him. He ducked into a cafe, ordered tea, sat alone. That's when a woman approached, late 60s, soft voice, American accent. I just want to say, I loved what you said about your mother. About grief. I lost mine too. It meant a lot. He looked up for the first time in days. His eyes softened. Thank you, he said, and she smiled. No matter what they say, you're still human. She walked away, and Harry sat there frozen. Because those 4 words were the most honest thing he'd heard since the interview. You're still human. Later that night, he FaceTimed Meghan. She didn't speak at first, just stared at him then. Finally, do you regret it? Harry looked down. He wanted to say no, wanted to say it was worth it, that it was just a moment, that Stewart ambushed him. But deep inside, he wasn't sure, so he told her the only truth he could. I don't know. The palace was silent. No official statement, no outreach, just more distance, more silence, and that silence was deafening. 3 weeks passed, then, another storm. This time, not from America. A BBC reporter released a leaked email from a senior royal aide, a response to the interview. It was short, but brutal. There is a difference between living your truth and selling it. The Duke of Sussex has chosen the latter. It wasn't signed, but everyone knew who it came from. William's office. The one line, selling it, became a headline of its own. Harry's memoir resurfaced. Clips from Oprah. Soundbites from Netflix. The past came rushing back. But this time, people weren't just skeptical. They were tired. A British tabloid ran a poll. Do you still trust Prince Harry? 56% said no. Not because of his choices, but because of his contradictions. And for the first time, the tide wasn't just turning. It was crashing. Harry felt it. The momentum. The narrative. The sense that the world he'd built in California, the image, the message. The closet was slipping. He tried to fight back. Gave a new interview to a friendly outlet. Talked about veterans. About therapy. About parenting. But no one was listening. They were still watching the Stewart clip. Still asking the question, why did he walk off? So he decided to answer. On his terms, he sat down. Alone. No press. No lights. Just a phone. He looked into the camera. And hit record. My name is Harry, and a few weeks ago, I walked off an interview. A long pause. I did that because I was angry, because I felt attacked. Because I wasn't ready to hear the questions I've spent years avoiding. Another pause. I've talked a lot about healing, about truth. But the truth is, I've used my story to protect myself, to explain myself, sometimes, even to justify myself. He looked down. I'm still angry. At the press. At my family. At the past. Another pause. But maybe. I've also been angry at myself, for not knowing who I am without the title, without the platform, without the pain. He looked up again. I'm not a victim, and I'm not a villain. I'm just a man trying to figure it out in public. His voice cracked. And for the first time in years he looked small. Not weak. Human. He ended the video with one line. I'll keep trying. I hope that's enough. He uploaded it. No press release, no promotion, just let it go. And the world responded. Not with headlines. With silence. And slowly something shifted. Some critics backed off. Not all. But some. A few journalists admitted it was the most real they'd seen him. And even Jon Stewart in a later episode acknowledged that. Courage. Jon. It's easy to talk when everyone claps. It's harder when they don't. I respect Harry for saying the hard thing. To himself. The audience clapped. Not for the spectacle. For the honesty. It wasn't redemption, but it was real. And for Harry, that was enough. For now, weeks passed. The headlines faded. The memes stopped. And the world, as it always does, moved on to the next scandal. But Harry didn't. Because something inside him had shifted. Not shattered, but cracked open. Just enough. For the first time in years, he stopped speaking at the world and started listening to it. Not the noise. Not the critics. Not the outrage. But the quiet voices. The ones in cafes. In shelters. In letters and messages from strangers. The ones that didn't care about titles, scandals, or crowns. The ones that simply said, I know what pain feels like too. He returned to California, to Meghan, to the children. And something about his presence was different. Less rehearsed. Less tense. More present. He played more with Archie. Held Lilibet longer when she cried. He didn't check his phone every 5 minutes anymore. Didn't pace the patio. Rehearsing statements. Or drafting comebacks. He still carried the weight. But he wasn't letting it lead him. One night, after putting the kids to bed, He and Meghan sat outside beneath the string lights. No cameras. No scripts. Just a quiet moment. She looked at him really, looked at him and asked, "Would you go back on the show again?" He smiled, not forced, not bitter, just soft. "Maybe not that show," he said. "But someday, I'll finish what I started." He began visiting veteran centers again. Privately, no press, no photo. Ops. He listened. He sat in silence with men who had seen what he'd seen. And worse, and he stopped trying to lead the conversation. He just let it happen. And in that space, something new was born. Respect. Not for his name, for his presence. Months passed, and slowly, without effort, the noise around him quieted. People stopped talking about Harry, and started talking to him. There was a difference, and he felt it one day. He received a letter from Jon Stewart. Handwritten. Simple. No apologies, just acknowledgement. You didn't deserve to be blindsided. But you also didn't deserve to keep carrying this weight alone. I hope you're healing not for the cameras, but for yourself. And if you ever want to finish the conversation, I'll be here. It was signed simply: Jon. Harry stared at the letter for a long time, then folded it carefully, and tucked it into a drawer. Not out of avoidance, out of care. In time, the pain became softer. Still there, but no longer the loudest voice in the room. He stopped giving interviews, stopped writing statements. And one day, he declined a $20 million offer for another memoir. "I've said enough," he told his agent. Instead, he wrote something else. Not about his life, about others. A children's book. About a little boy who lost his way in the forest, searching for his mother's voice, but found it not in echoes, but in the beating of his own heart. He dedicated it to Diana, and signed it not as Duke, not as Prince, just Harry. It wasn't a bestseller. It didn't trend on Twitter, but it found its way into schools, hospitals, shelters. One child wrote him a letter. "I read your book when my mom died. I didn't feel so alone anymore." He kept that letter beside the one from Jon. Side by side. Sometimes, late at night, he would re-watch the interview, the Stewart one, not to punish himself, but to remember, not the humiliation, not the shame, but the moment when the curtain fell and the real story began. His story, the one not written by tabloids, or ghostwriters, or even trauma, but by choice, and grace, and humility. Because in the end, it wasn't the walk-off that defined him. It was the walk back. And maybe, just maybe, that's what redemption really is. Not a perfect comeback, but an imperfect man choosing to return to himself.